in the context of AI. So that's great, but it's also a big risk. So this AI liability that is like there, the board members are going to be asking, where's the revenue?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the BPM 360 podcast. My name is Caspar, your host, and with me is, as usual, my good friend and co-host, Russell. Russell, how are you, my friend, and where does the podcast find you today?
Hello, Caspar. I'm at home in Hattingen. It's really cold here, crispy cold, blue sky. Been awesome.
Oh, nice.
I was a bit sick last week, but I did recover. Went for a long bike ride on Sunday and really enjoyed the winterly landscape. So and now up and running. Everything's great.
All right, very good. So let's have a chat. It's just you and me today. We're giving our guest a bit of a breather for a week, so that's awfully cool. In the week where we're recording this, it's when the World Economic Forum takes place in Davos as well. And I saw that our good friend Professor Will van der Aalst is actually in Davos, trying to get a feel for the whole AI discussion, which is a very interesting bridge, I would say, to the topic that you and I will start discussing in today's podcast. It's a report by Deloitte, where and the report is called the Deloitte Tech Trends 2026. Let's just give it a summary that AI forces structural rebuilding. In other words, freely translated, the fact that companies want to apply AI, enterprise AI, I would call that, forces them to look at the structural design of their organization. You read the article as well, Russell. What's your first take on that?
Yeah. So as you remember, when we had the Mirko podcast on the trends for 2026, and I said I'm a bit disappointed by 2025, not really taking up the speed. Hand in hand, now these reports on the AI pilots failing now has been taken to a next level where they say they predict for 2026, 2027, 40% of the initiatives to actually be stopped. And we've always discussed this from an angle that we're saying, okay, but the answer, the cure for all problems in this world is BPM. Yeah,
of course.
No, but specifically in this context, we were preaching it. Well, I have definitely been preaching. Said, come on, a process-driven, a process-centric implementations is the way to go to ensure the sustainable outcome, to identify the right places to deploy it, and ultimately also to assure the compliance and take care of all the risks. Now, this is exactly, I think, becoming where AI is becoming to a certain extent a liability. So I think more and more, you was also saying as well, BPM is getting involved or is somehow embedded in business transformational methodologies in the context of AI. So that's great, but it's also a big risk. So this AI liability that is like there, the board members are going to be asking, where's the revenue? Society is going to be asking, why are the workers getting told off, although it's AI that is taking the wrong decisions? And the regulators are going to ask, who the hell allowed this AI out of the cage? So the risk is so manifold of things, let's say, blowing in the face of these initiatives, and ultimately it'll come down to BPM has failed, and so BPM has to grow up faster. And nobody can say yes. It's like a kid moving out of the house when he's 35. He says, "Well, I don't quite feel mature enough." BPM is it cannot come up with the excuse that we still have to develop the methods. Oh, we're still not quite there with the tools or anything like that. No, they're the fundamental elements to make BPM successful. They've been around for decades. We've been preaching them also for decades. But the organizations applying them, they have to do it properly. They cannot half-heartedly say, yes, but we're doing process or we're doing BPM, and then not do it with a certain thoroughness and intense, because it's a big risk for BPM, because if the initiatives blow up, this says, told you all this process stuff doesn't work. Yeah. That's what I'm really, I see this and I read it with great concern. And I also ask myself, so is it a failure in the BPM itself that this risk is even there, and that that BPM isn't being applied, isn't being embedded? Who's the fault? Is it the people not managing the BPM, or is it BPM in itself? And to a certain extent, sometimes I think maybe this whole methodology, it's just it's not capable. It's not coping with the organizations and the AI initiatives, and there's maybe something missing there.
But
Don't know. It's always
just to make sure that I understand that, Russell. What you're basically saying is that BPM runs the risk of becoming the scapegoat for AI failures.
Yes, maybe it is the scapegoat. Maybe it is fault.
I'm not sure. Well, I'm sure that I don't completely agree with that, which is something that doesn't really happen often on this show, to be honest. But we got one here. So here's my take on this. At the moment, so AI has been around for like 2 milliseconds on the Earth scale. BPM has been around for 4 milliseconds on that same scale. Let's be very honest. But BPM has been around for about 30 to 40 years. The use case of BPM for AI, however, is a very young one, meaning that only in the last, I would say that's 18 months, I would say we're seriously talking about if you want your AI implementation to succeed, you need to take a more process-centric approach in order to safeguard your guardrails for the AI and to give it context. And it needs to know in which area and arena it needs to play. So at the moment that we now see, and AI is going through that hype cycle, the Gartner hype cycle, and it's now on its way down to the trough of dissolution. So yeah, people will start looking for scapegoats because a lot of massive AI programs at organizations are going to fail. Same as the Deloitte report says, 40% of them are on the verge of being canceled. And why is that? Because they don't bring value. But to blame that on the linking to a concept that is very, very new, I would say that that's quite premature, to be honest. However, the one thing that I do align on with you in this particular case is that it does have the potential in a while from now to be in that situation, given the track record that BPM has of having, the track record is slightly shady when it comes to delivering real value with organizations. Only a very few of them who did it right actually got value out of that. How do you look at that? I just think it's too early for that.
Yes, but I maybe it's also not the first time that we've seen, let's say, trends or certain like applications of BPM that have been obvious, also not managing to catch on in the scope as it should have been, resulting in a lot of big transformations completely failing, more on the change management, business readiness side, or on the IT side. So is there a fundamental flaw? Is it a missing sexiness to BPM? Or is it like the complexity of the methodology? Or is it the tool's fault because they didn't come up with a better UI in time? Is there a systematic error around BPM that it's not managing when these trends come? So even just think about SAP, how even SAP as an ERP provider has been preaching to think process-centric, and customers as well as system integrators completely, the Germans say, Totalverweigerung. Yeah, which great word, actually. It sounds good, doesn't it? But they completely just, they're like...
in denial.
Exactly. They just rejected that completely. And so can we always just say, yes, it's the other's fault? How shouldn't we be more as the advocates of BPM say maybe it's the other way around? Maybe BPM just isn't. There's a flaw in the BPM concept, in the BPM communication, in the marketing. It is something that is causing repeatedly a situation where you and I, personally spend, and all our customers and colleagues and Mitstreiter, as the Germans say, I love it, running around, like preaching BPM and nobody's coming. So it's like, we sit there, we preach, and we look into the church, and the church is empty.
So let me give you an analogy.
What's wrong?
What's wrong? I got an analogy.
And I'm also getting some as well.
Yeah, bear with me.
Okay, great. Come on.
I stepped on the plane this morning at 7 o'clock early from Düsseldorf to London, where I am now. And I can tell that there is a a soccer match going on in London tonight because the plane was half full with Dortmund jerseys. And
Okay.
it was also half full of people drinking beer at 7 a.m. Those two Venn diagrams are a circle, by the way. They overlap completely. Anyway, taking soccer as an analogy. So what you're describing is I have a football stadium in which I can actually bring in a new pitch of grass, right? The pitch. I can slide it out. I can slide it in. It's fundamental to a soccer game, the grass, and it's being kept and maintained by people. And it's not a sexy job. We put 2 times 11 players on the pitch, being AI agents. And the game is a bloody mess. It's 0-0 and it's no fun to watch. There is no value. And we blame it on the grass. That's what you're describing. And it's like, and the same applies to transformation. We put 22 people from an ERP vendor on the pitch. Nothing happens. The people in the stands, the business users, they're furious because they didn't get any value for money. And we blame the pitch, the grass pitch. And I don't think that that's the real root cause, to be honest. Sometimes there is a pitch which is really bad, but I mean, come on.
So I think my angle was a bit different.
Okay.
I'm saying, let's say I'm not ultimately questioning, say, maybe the fundamentals of BPM in the context of being implementable in the context of certain, let's say, setups. Yeah, and in big organizations, we see that there is the use case ISO, there is the use case IT transformation, there is big business strategy transformation. All these use cases, process centricity can play a valuable role, but it's always such an uphill battle to sell it.
True.
And the easy way out is to say they just don't get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, true. That's too easy.
Let's go into it. I'll explain it to you again why we need an end-to-end view. I'll explain to you again what so cool is about this tool. But if you turn it around, isn't there something like at some time the mass of it failing or not being adopted and the maturity not growing fast enough to really have the effect? Isn't that some time where you have to turn around and say there must be a systematic error, maybe also on your side, on the BPM side, on the concepts, on the marketing, on the way it doesn't fit to the fundamental thinking of managers, that it doesn't set it, maybe it doesn't create enough substantial, fast enough value. So is there anything in the fundamentals of BPM we have to rethink to gain traction more fast? Or do we stick on it and say, no, we have to stick with the quality of this methodology and not just be out for a quick success, because that's not going to work either.
But the question I very often have is, why are you taking a BPM approach? And that's the question I ask my clients every time and again. Why are you doing this? And very often there's a couple of different major use cases around BPM, which is fine. If I come into an organization, a client where BPM has traditionally evolved from quality management, then I know already that they're going to be very detailed about it and they want to have every little dot and comma correct. And the question really is, does that add value? The thing that I also always say as well is, listen, a model is a simplified version of reality. So what you should not do is try to mimic reality because your models get overly complex. And the question really is where is the actual added value of documenting your processes, which is the fundamental task that you do with BPM that enables all of the more, let's say, exquisite use cases around process intelligence and process adherence management and all of these kind of things. Ultimately, in my belief, is that the true added value from BPM does not come from having models. It comes from having insight into the dependencies of your enterprise artifacts, which could be activities, roles, applications, risks, regulations, you name it. They're all connected. And that's what you try to grasp. I mean, if we go back to ERP very quickly, you've seen many ERP implementations. So have I. How often did you not encounter that we configure something on the left and then on the right, something stops working and we have no freaking clue what happened? And why is that? Because we don't know underneath the surface how everything is connected. And the same applies to organizations. They don't know. So if you have doing an invoice, you're processing an invoice in the procurement process, things might not work there, not because the people in accounts payable don't know how to do the job. No, it's because we did a mistake in the contracting stage way before we actually started creating purchase orders on it. And if we don't know that connection, then models will not give you any value. And I think if you look in the last 20, 30 years, I mean, BPM is not sexy inherently. I mean, even my own wife used to tell me, if I can't sleep, I ask you to talk about your job, and I'll sleep in like 5 minutes. Is it really, really? She actually said that. And so it must be boring to non-BPM fanatics. And that is something that I think also hasn't got enough attention over the last decades, which puts BPM in a bit of a fragile place from a reputation standpoint.
Maybe there's another trend we talked about that somehow we have to question. So maybe today I'm just more
I'm curious now.
Self-critical. So also we've always been talking about, and I think one of the articles we were looking at also went to that about the convergence of AI and BPM.
Oh yeah.
So kind of like one big more methodology and model, which we fundamentally really believe that makes a lot of sense, and it doesn't, it's not a big, say, challenge to really bring these things together. But on the other hand, it brings let's say another dimension or another complexity to your models. So because in the back of your mind, you need an architect that understands the big model, whereas before you always had like little departments, each taking care of their little ecosystem of model. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they were looking at the processes from this perspective to be able to do ISO. The others were looking at their processes for the aspect of SAP. There was redundancy in the work they were doing big time. Sometimes also a lot of misunderstanding because they were not aligned and they're, not just inconsistencies and redundancies, but, sometimes just bland. When these worlds came together, there was a lot of friction until they managed to understand what the other's talking about before they could define even an interface or something like this. So on the one hand, we see this big value, but in order to manage this, there's a bit of an expectation. The local groups doing their thing, however they thought it would fit them best, they said, it's like like the government. It says, oh, no, this is all being defined up there. I'm going to stop thinking. I'm going to stop acting until they tell me what to do. And then you have to have this over architecture or this over governance board having to take care of all these local problems. From a use case perspective, but maybe taking care of the local, but I'm in Brazil, I have these and these requirements to do this and this. But you've got one big model, I have to comply with it. I don't see my requirements reflected there. Whereabouts in this big model is my use case actually covered? So I'll just do nothing until you tell me what to do. So this breaking down into local factions that are able to act and living with the fact that you will lose on friction, but you win on speed for each acting. That's something where I'm not quite sure, and this is maybe just to get a positive nudge into it. You should, let's say, think big and start small, or think big and start fast, in the context of that we need to get away from this pedantic, I need to have control of it all. But I have tools and mechanisms to get these together. So there is like a fundamental belief. There is one model that has a view, EA oriented, and has a view, BPM oriented, and a sub view, which is maybe the ISO view on the processes. And ultimately, we do not stop people doing process management with whatever methods and means they want to do it, although we know it's not wrong. It's better they do anything than do nothing, and that we start that maybe even AI is a tool to help us then collect, consolidate, and map into a repository without losing the speed. So the factor of being übergenau and slow and not losing the people rather than winning the people for the cause by making this picture even bigger and more complex rather than gaining speed. And I think that's what a lot of IT initiatives, they say, we need to get going. And before, if you really said, no, we have to do the process. So you're losing this agility. And agility was fantastic for the system integrators. You said, let's just start now. Just start. And then we'll see where we end. And we fail. And then we do it again. And we get paid big money. So the agility there was fantastic for that business model, and was the opposite, was used as the opposite, or it was used as a leverage against process management, and it was the big hype. Now our belief was, yes, but if you can be agile in the context of a well-defined framework, and you need agility there to optimize, but you need a bigger framework that has a bigger understanding of the overarching, even objectives. Again, you could question that. So who is the person that defines and keeps this all together and defines the blocks and the borderlines where agility can happen? Or do you just not let swarm intelligence, everybody go crazy and agile, and at some time hope for the best?
Oh, you just opened Pandora's box, Russell.
But that's what it seems to be happening.
Let me just reflect on that for a little. I mean, you brought up agility, right? Just remember that.
Yeah.
I remember working with a client that said, we do everything agile now. And then I'm meaning with agile the way that IT uses agile. So agile development, which basically means we need to do sprints, and we got tribes and chapters and God knows what kind of jargon that the rest of the company does not understand at all. And we're going to do sprints, and we're going to do a quick MVP, a minimum viable product. And then we learn from our mistakes, which I really like. And then we do iterations, and we come to a certain level of maturity in the product. Very well. So I was talking to that client around BPM, because they also figured out that we need to do something with processes. So, okay, you have 127 tribes working on the various parts of your network and your application landscape, because they typically work on applications, right? How do you ensure that tribe number 2 is not working on the same thing as tribe number 68? I mean, do you have any idea what kind of overarching coordination that requires to make sure that you're not developing 2 different things that impact the very same process? And then by doing that, you have no clue if there will be any adverse effects of those 2 things happening at the very same time. That has always been one of my major, let's say, bottlenecks with Agile, is that it moves so fast that the rest of the organization can't keep up. And they have somewhere they picked up a conviction, not all of them, but a lot of them, that documenting a process is not a task done in Agile. And that leads to a lot of mess, period.
So I love that, because that is exactly the example that we always brought up as well, to say you need to know which other tribe to talk to, because you have certain requirements from an interface perspective, or you need to clarify, are we working on the same, and how do we, ensure that we don't build systems that are kind of breaking each other. And the last argument I always brought in here says you need to know who to get involved. So you need decision taking, and agility is nice, but in the complexity of big enterprises, you can't have 127 people go with similar requests and decisions, whatever, to the organization, trying to get concise decisions that are coherent in a total big picture. Or on the other hand, having meetings with the same person 10 times on the same topic, because they're actually all talking about the same requirements from a business perspective. But each tribe has its own spin on it that they need to clarify with them. So the efficiency, I mean, I've always brought up these where I said, this is even with agility, you need to have structure, and you need to have context, and you need to have your North Star at least defined on how things should work together. And that's where the integrated view on what you want to achieve has to be there.
So that's interesting, because that means that you basically, what you're saying, and I would agree with that, is that you need to be, if you want to do Agile, you need to really define on which level of granularity do I allow Agile to do whatever it needs to do, but the levels above need to be more structured. Because if I allow agility to move up too high into that structure, then there is too big of a part of the organization that's going to be in turmoil for too long, and it's going to be moving parts all over the place. While if you say, listen, in my structure, in my breakdown structure, where I say I'm now working on product A, and within product A, I have 5 use cases and 5 tribes are working on that, and they all work in agile and they do whatever they need to do. For me, that's a fine level of granularity. But if I say you're now doing agile on making sure that we got product A, B, C, D, E on the road, that's probably not going to work. And again, I'm not an agile expert or a scrum master or a coach or whatever they want to use, but I just apply common sense, which is heavily out of fashion in 2026.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, it's maybe a feeble approach to think about how you can break this issue of having a too rigid, too over-regulating BPM governance in place.
True.
Because if you sit down and think things through, you go down the layers and you set the rules, and you come into a fundamental understanding of what you would need to do it really, really good, like with the 100% or even like the 90%. But the down trade, or the trade-off in the context, especially around speed, acceptance with people, giving people freedom to take own decisions around how they do things. That's always something that I think has been one of the biggest factors that have made people just reject it if they can. And you know what, if people say they play, they play stupid, or they play on time. There's these other different like corporate games that you could play. They play deaf. They play. I didn't read that.
Yeah.
Did you? They play
that. That's
so.
That's a
there's
cool
all these
one,
corporate games that they play to then really make it not happen. So I think not necessarily just in the context of AI now, but
no. I agree.
It's making me think about we need more rapid, more rapid way of getting BPM in, and I know that discussing roles is super important to get its roles established over a long time and get them enabled. But then you say, but can't this be done more pragmatic and faster?
Yeah. And
we let things evolve more, and we get them included and embraced over time, rather than coming with, this is the plan.
Which is a very interesting angle, Russell, because what you're basically saying is that if you're going to staff your BPM project, you need to be really careful where to put the generalists and where to put the perfectionists. If you put a perfectionist at the top, it's doomed. You need to put a generalist on the top, pragmatic, and you need to have perfectionist way more down when it comes to the nitty-gritty details. That's an interesting one. So never appoint a perfectionist to lead your BPM project.
I think that's a wisdom about a lot of projects. I think there's a lot of initiatives and maybe even departments, that's something you need the more, and even think about the process owners versus the process experts.
That was my next point, actually. Just to interrupt you very briefly, sorry for that. So, because that was a point I was going to make before I got sidetracked by my own thoughts, which happens if you have my brain sometimes. Process owners, they typically have the accountability. And you should typically not give them the responsibility, because these people are typically high up in the hierarchy of an organization. They don't have the time for that. So what you very often see is in order to gain traction and keep up speed, they delegate the process lead, the responsibility, into a couple of levels down in the organization. And that level, that champion, is very often the translation between, let's say, the accountability of the owner and the process expert all the way at the operational level. And then you should also then, when you delegate that responsibility, you basically also delegate the mandate to say, this is your little part of our total taxonomy. Be as agile as you can be. And by the way, here's a standard set of processes you can start with and see if they work for us. And just validate them instead of having to come up from scratch. Or you process mine them and you work based off what people have been doing, which not necessarily might be the right thing, but at least it will get you somewhere. So there's, I think, a lot of instruments of making it quicker.
Actually, that's a good point. Let's dig into that one just a couple of minutes. So I was discussing roles and responsibilities for this customer, and then one consultant comes up with the standard BPM roles, and I'm saying, they're standard BPM roles. Now I've seen it, been there, done that, and then I was going, but let's just think about this organization. They've actually already been doing process documentation for a couple of years for ISO. They got a lot of big transformational initiatives running, which BPM is now like part of. And here they have big project roles, they have boards for decisions, and they have an IT organization where they have key users and so you look at these management organizations, you come in with your little suitcase with your BPM methodology in there, and you open it up, you get your roles and responsibilities out, and everybody goes, we're going to put them on top, to the left, in the middle, shake it through. What are we going to do with these roles? And I was thinking there, as Lucas says, and I don't know, I've done it before, not just once, but I really started questioning myself, how do we go about this a bit more leaner, a bit more inclusive around this, that we really try to embrace much more the existing communication of roles and what they have there, and really try to work out where there's something missing. Now, and then I thought, but something that typically, if somebody says we need to do BPM, one of the big topics I would say always today is say, we don't have a proper end-to-end ownership established. So process ownership on I am accountable for the audits when they come in for
so
processes.
Functional versus end-to-end.
So we'll have some like a functional, something like that. But on definitely, it's always like ownership / end-to-end. These are kind of like the things that typically are void in a structured manner that it really can work. And I'd say so. Sometimes they have a project that looks on certain end-to-ends, and they have like a project gremium there. So I was thinking, could you just start by defining one role, the end-to-end process owner?
You picked the most difficult one of all.
Yeah, exactly. But the most fundamental one. And
agree.
then you say, let's jump in and says, let's align with the management and the strategy what you expect this process owner to own and to be accountable for over the course of 1-3 years. And then we say, that's interesting. That's a challenge, isn't it? Without giving any nominations yet, or I'll say be gone.
It's true.
But just from a construct, it says, okay, now just we have the means and methods of BPM, but we also have your means and methods of whatever you're doing. It says, what do we need to do to make this person successful? What does he need? What does he need? What is the tools, the people, the procedures, the decision power, mandate, etc. Money, budgets. And from there, always say, he needs to be able to do this and this. It says, well, do you have existing roles that currently cover this topic? Do you have tools in place that, do you have already KPIs defined that? And do you have processes already defined? Do you have a clear picture of where you are, where you want to go, and etc. And from this, just taking this fundamental role that is very, very much the strategic element for a certain, let's say, domain, on taking the BPM strategy and operationalizing it, and taking that then to derive which roles do you really need, and can you not piggyback on existing roles, initiatives, structures, and from there come up with a more included a role, a matrix of things. So, there will be a process expert. Maybe it's called different. Maybe it is analog to the key user or something like that. But without just being so blunt as to just open up your satchel and bring out the standard BPM roles and say, hey, this is what we need to establish on top of your 20 other consulting firm. We got the Lean Six Sigma. I'm a green belt. I'm a black belt. It says, oh my God, yeah. And I'm the Kanban Ninjago
Scrum
or something
master,
like that. And I'm the Scrum Master. Yeah, exactly. And so you're going, that's what I mean. With this overboarding with our mental models and our methodologies, and we're coming into mature organizations that have been there, done that in so many different aspects. And how do you go in there without saying, oh, no. America with the common, but it's like, so it's really cool. And definitely that's in supporting as a responsible for supporting the process owner in achieving his goal, because that's ultimately what they do with a bit of, you need to have a lobotomy and a bit of brainwashing that we get your BPM methods in there and the Lean Six Sigma methodology out or no, only joke.
I know.
It's a fantastic, these people have fundamental methodology knowledge in a detail that is super helpful. But then you say, but that role is already existing. And how can you just say, Lean Six Sigma, you're a black belt. What do we do with that? and it says, yeah, that's fantastic that you are now, what do you call, rename them? Or we just say the Lean Six Sigma black green belts are assigned to process owners to support them in getting this and this responsibility done. Would be much more inclusive than coming in and say, where's the process expert? I'm a key user, I'm a green belt, and I'm the process expert, and I'm also responsible for filling up the coffee in the coffee.
Russell, we'll call them process intelligence experts because that's short for pie. And everybody loves to get pie. I got pie for you. Everybody opens you up with open arms. Oh God, Russell, we need to talk about this whole taxonomy thing in one of the other episodes because you triggered me on the end-to-end process ownership, because that's something. And even today, I had a long session with a client in the UK, and then they show the taxonomy, and I can immediately tell you're going to implement S4, right? Because I can simply tell from the labels on the level 1.
That's a tough one, because I also struggled with that one big time, because we took a decision to structure our reference content according to SAP's end-to-end. And I'm going,
don't do that.
And then just hear me out, because I said, because the Germans say, die Welt ist noch nicht bereit. No, it's because fundamentally we want to build up a business architecture and map it against an SAP, let's say, best practice structure. But as long as in the all HANA projects, customers are being, first of all, confronted with an end-to-end domain map defined by SAP, that if you need to, in the first step, say, but we do it differently because it makes more sense, blah, 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 you're already kind of like in a discussion around fundamentals that most people aren't really up to. So, so my current argumentation is our reference model for SAP projects is aligned with the SAP end-to-end map to best fit your scoping exercise of business scenarios versus the scope items in that phase. As soon as you have agreed upon that and moving forward, I would always just say that is the project, like it's a stream, that, the lead to cash is then it's the lead to cash stream. It is not the fundamental one where I say, this is where I allocate domains for process owners end to end from a business perspective long term. Because then we go beyond the project into a long-term strategic view on ownership. And it's independent, definitely independent from SAP or Salesforce or any other application. It is purely business-driven. So I think there is a coexistence. We're going to have to live with the coexistence that for the sake of scoping, preparing, and going to the activate phase, it makes sense to have a project end-to-end domain charter, which is decoupled then from the long-term enterprise map that you would then build up. But I'm not happy. But again, uphill battle, discussing, and with which added value in that moment when the whole organization is just totally super focused on the SAP project.
So here's what we're going to do. If we start discussing that now, our episode will be 2 hours before we know it. So we got to the end of this one. The next one we do without a guest, we'll tackle this, because I got a lot to say about this as well. That one will probably be like an hour, and then we're not even done yet. I really like that. I think we need to wrap it up for this one, which I liked the conversation. We went everywhere across the board today, Russell, but we started out.
One comment on speed, because you've always complained about my internet speed.
It's really good this time.
And it really is good.
What did you do?
But you complained, but the biggest complaint came from my frustrated son. So I just rang up my internet provider, says, do you have any upgrades? And we doubled the internet rate. So it's like,
that explains it, because you're as fast as me, and I'm in a hotel right now, which is, I was looking at it, it's like, hey, wait a minute. Russell's at 98% as well. Absolutely bloody brilliant. None of our listeners has any idea what we're talking about. Doesn't matter. Doesn't really matter. To the listeners, I will say thank you very much for sticking with us for today for 45 minutes, 2 rambling old geezers on BPM. Catch you next time. Russell, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.